In 1942, the United States Army made a decision that outraged its own soldiers. It took away one of the finest submachine guns ever made, the Thompson, and began replacing it with something that looked like it was built in a high school metal shop. Soldiers took one look at it and gave it a nickname it would never escape: the grease gun. It was ugly, it was crude, it cost less than a good pair of boots, and it went on to serve the United States military for over 50 years, longer than almost any small arm in American history. This is the story of the M3, the weapon nobody wanted and nobody could replace. To understand why the grease gun existed, you have to understand the problem with the gun it replaced. The Thompson submachine gun was a masterpiece, machined from solid steel, beautifully finished, reliable, and devastating up close. Soldiers loved it. There was just one problem: it was almost impossible to make enough of them. A single Thompson took dozens of machining operations, skilled labor, and expensive materials. Early in the war, each one cost the government over $200 at a time when the country needed to arm millions of men as fast as factories could run. Meanwhile, America's enemies and allies had already figured out a different approach. The British were cranking out the Sten gun, a crude tube of stamped metal that cost a few dollars and worked just well enough. The Germans had the MP-40, built largely from stamped steel parts. The lesson of the Second World War was becoming clear. In a total war, the best weapon isn't the finest one. It's the one you can actually put in every soldier's hands. So in 1942, the Army asked for something radical: a submachine gun that could be stamped out of sheet metal like a car fender, using the same presses Detroit was already running. General Motors' Guide Lamp Division, a factory that made headlights, got the contract. The result was the M3. It had a stamped steel body, a simple wire stock that slid in and out, and a bare minimum of machined parts. It fired the same big .45 caliber round as the Thompson, and it cost the government about $15. Soldiers were not impressed. Next to the Thompson, the M3 looked like a joke, a metal tube with a magazine sticking out of it. The nickname came instantly. It looked exactly like the grease guns mechanics used to lubricate car chassis. The name was an insult. It stuck for the next half century. But then something interesting happened. The soldiers who actually carried it into combat started to change their minds. The grease gun fired slowly, around 450 rounds per minute, one of the slowest rates of any submachine gun of the war. On paper, that looked like a weakness. In practice, it was a gift. That slow, steady rate made the M3 remarkably controllable. A soldier could hold it on target through a full burst, where faster guns climbed wildly. Tank crews, paratroopers, and drivers, the men who needed something compact for close-range defense, found that the ugly little gun simply worked. It shrugged off mud and dirt. It had almost nothing inside it that could break. And when something did go wrong, the fix was usually simple enough to handle in the field. The M3 landed in Normandy. It fought through the hedgerows of France, the streets of German towns, and the islands of the Pacific. An improved version, the M3A1, simplified the design even further, removing the crank handle and letting soldiers cock the weapon by simply putting a finger into a slot in the bolt. It was about as close as a firearm has ever come to being a disposable appliance. And that was exactly the point. Here's where the story should have ended. The war finished in 1945. The submachine gun era gave way to assault rifles. The M14, then the M16, became the American soldier's weapon. Every other submachine gun of the war generation was retired, sold off, or melted down. The grease gun refused to leave. Tank crews kept it. Inside the cramped hull of an armored vehicle, a full-length rifle is a liability. Too long to store, too awkward to bring out of a hatch in an emergency. The M3, with its collapsed wire stock tucked neatly into a bracket inside the tank. So while infantry moved on to rifles, American armor crews quietly kept their $15 submachine guns through Korea, through Vietnam, through the Cold War in Germany. And then, in 1991, Operation Desert Storm, American M1 Abrams tanks, the most advanced armored vehicles on Earth, rolled into combat carrying a weapon designed in 1942. Tank crews in the Gulf War were issued grease guns nearly 50 years after the first ones came off a headlight assembly line in Michigan. Some units were still drawing them from armories into the 1990s. Think about what that means. The weapon soldiers mocked as a cheap stopgap outlived the beloved Thompson by decades. It outlived the M14. It served alongside 4 generations of rifles. The temporary wartime substitute became one of the longest-serving small arms in American military history. There's a lesson buried in the grease gun story, and militaries keep having to relearn it. The perfect weapon that can't be produced in numbers loses to the adequate weapon that can. Beauty doesn't win wars. Availability does. Reliability does. The M3 was never the best submachine gun in the world, but it was cheap enough to make by the hundreds of thousands, simple enough that nothing broke, and compact enough that it kept finding one more job to do, decade after decade. The soldiers who named it meant it as mockery. But looking back across 50 years of service, the name reads differently now. The grease gun was exactly what its name promised. Not glamorous, not beautiful, just a tool that worked every single time someone reached for it. And in war, that turns out to be the highest compliment there is.